Hello.
Hello, Mr. Thomas Valenti. Good morning.
How are you?
Good.
I've got, can see a few people. I'm audible, I think.
Yeah, you're audible.
You're gonna enable my screen share so I can show some slides.
I think screen
We're ready,
sharing.
yeah. I should be able to do that whenever you're ready. I'll do that.
I think we'll just wait. We'll just wait for some time.
Yeah,
We'll just wait for
chat a bit. Want me to be quiet, or should we see everybody's?
Yeah, let's just wait for the others to join in.
বেরিয়ে গেছি আমি এখন বসে জামা কাপড় পরে থাকতে পারবো না
Rajdeep, can we start?
Mr. Thomas Valenti, even Mr. Jaideep Mehta is here, who's the founder of the corporate legal, who's actually organizing.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Fine, sir. It's nice to meet you.
Good to have you with us. Yeah.
And let us hope that we will get a lot of knowledge from you today, sir.
Let's hope so. I'm gonna hopefully give you some ideas, some thoughts about what's going on, some things we can be thinking about, and then hopefully have some time to chat, to have some conversation as well, if you feel like that would be useful.
To have you.
Yeah.
We are very lucky to have you here today.
You're kind to say that.
Actually,
Yeah.
Tom, the problem is that there are a lot of webinars that are happening. So I just jumped from the other webinar.
You were busy, yeah. What did you do before this one?
So it was a talk show by 5 very senior counsels of Bombay and debating as to the applicability and establishing an e-court. So there were debates ranging from accessibility of technology, because really it's now on technology.
Yeah.
Because Indian courts have now seen, as it's gone from a very long way from accessing case orders, case numbers, and orders of the judges from paper copy to now everything being online. So now, I do not know, but I think it's given a knee jerk and maybe a push for this entire system to go online.
I tried to push, yeah. I sit in a variety of different capacities, but one is as an arbitrator on commercial cases that are mandatory from one division of our court system here. And of course, our court system is shut down, and the arbitration are on smaller matters. And so I encouraged the court administrator to let us arbitrate these online. And they said the court wasn't set up to do that. And I was muted, but I was saying that it's a struggle for court administrators to manage how to move to the online atmosphere, because they're a bit leery of it, and then we have all these reports about insecurity, and we'll talk a bit about that today as well, about security issues and things.
Right.
Hopefully we'll get some input and some thoughts from everybody on the call as well.
Right. So I think we should begin. We'll let the other participants join in as and when it's convenient for them.
Good.
So,
I'm gonna use some slides.
Perfect.
Oops.
I'll just give a quick introduction of you.
Go ahead. Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Yeah.
Okay. The Corporate Legal presents. This is the second webinar. Today we're going to talk on preparing for and managing disputes in the COVID-19 era by a very distinguished gentleman, Mr. Thomas Valenti. He's a Chicago-based conflict resolution specialist who's attorney, mediator, arbitrator, facilitator, and a trainer. And he's traveled the world over training students in the field of mediation. And he's also a very distinguished member of the International Mediation Institute's mentor to the youth. Tom, over to you.
Okay, I'm going to let me show you some slides. We're gonna share some thoughts today, but I'll give you. You should be able to see the screen now.
Yeah.
Let me get you in a different view. Sorry, hold on one second. Trying not to show the. Not sure what you're seeing. Hold on. Let me see if I can fix this before.
So I think you can press Control F5 if you want the slide. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
All right. So I'm trying to just show one view, but when I'm not hosting it, it's a little bit difficult here. So what we're going to talk about today is what is really the impact of this COVID-19 era. And Raj and I had a chat yesterday about are we in the era? Is it pre-era, post-era? We're certainly not pre-era, and I think this is going to last a long time. So I think the COVID-19 era really takes us perhaps through the end of this year. And so we'll talk a bit about that. And then see how we as practitioners fit into that picture. And I think on the call, we have people who are probably advocates, maybe some corporate representatives, and probably as well, maybe even people who sit as mediators or arbitrators and who manage disputes in that fashion. I know that lately there's a lot of discussion about security issues with regard to moving some of our work to online platforms. And so we'll spend some time talking about that. And then I can give you a couple of examples, if we have time, about how I'm using it and others are using it in both arbitration and mediation sessions. And at the end, we'll have some time to chat along the way. With your permission, Raj, I think I'm happy to have questions at any point in time during our discussion. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. So let's look at COVID-19. It really, I think, is a game changer. What do we have going on? I think Most countries around the world, certainly in India, you're still on a very strict travel ban, right, with both regard to air travel, rail travel, and perhaps even local bans on transportation access. I know in most countries the courts are closed, or certainly very scaled back. Here, there's a very small opportunity for, especially in the area of criminal courts, opportunity for people to have some court participation, both online and rarely in physical presence. There are certain emergency situations where we can access a judge, but that's quite rare. Besides the legal structure, we know that in many industries, projects are just stalled. You know, whether that's in the construction area. Here in the U.S., construction is not a prohibited activity, so our construction projects are in process. But all logistics and supply chain things have really been interrupted. So that's the background. And as practitioners, we probably have some way that we interface with each of those activities. Either we're a court practitioner, or we advise construction clients or supply chain clients, and they're all coming to us with some kind of problem or anticipated further problems about how do we manage the effects of this pandemic. And so what we really have is some kind of a perfect storm, right? There's each of us individually is being impacted. If we're a member of a chamber or a law practice, that's been affected. Certainly our personal lives have been affected. If we're in the business community, our businesses have been affected, and our local and global economies are affected as well. Yet we must still survive. We have to go on. We have to figure out how we're going to do this. I think for me anyway, and what I've heard from a lot of people is that at the beginning of all of this, we thought this was going to be a short-term thing, and we might have perhaps even ignored it for a couple of weeks and thought, well, it'll be over and I'll go back to business as normal. I think we shouldn't be thinking like that anymore, that we have to adjust our thinking about how we're going to manage this in some kind of virtual environment. And that's really what I think we can chat about today is what are the things that we can be doing online. And I'm going to specifically focus on dispute resolution. When I talk about dispute resolution, I'm really including three areas of work: negotiation, arbitration, and mediation. And all of that is encompassed in this chat today. So what are the challenges that we're all going to have in effective managing of disputes? We have to think about it. If we're in a business, we have to think about what kind of protocols we have in place to manage disputes. For example, I was advised a couple of weeks ago with regard to a real estate matter, a global entity had stopped paying rent on, I think they have 300 locations around the world, and they simply decided that the pandemic allowed them not to pay rent any longer. And so that began a series of emails, most of which that don't get answered because everybody's overloaded with work. But that business decided to put a protocol in place that basically, on the economic side, stopped payments. And then it was followed by an email saying, let's have a conversation. But they didn't have the capacity to have a conversation for 2 or 3 weeks. And so yesterday, I think it was, finally after 2.5 weeks, they found the time to schedule a phone call. So I think as business advisors, we need to think about what our protocols are in dealing with people, because to turn off the payment faucet without some kind of conversation is probably not building a lot of goodwill between people. And so the second bullet point here talks about creating a dialogue or having conversations with people to mitigate and avoid disputes, rather than perhaps incite one by just turning off the economic flow right away. Raj, you were going to say something?
In fact, Tom, sorry, just to cut in.
Yeah, please.
In India, there's another problem that we are facing. There's massive retrenchment of employees. Cutting down, downsizing of institutions, and without any, the only cause, relative cause is COVID. But it's, as you said, it's without any dialogue, without any sort of communication. So that's what's happening.
Yeah, I think managing employer-employee relationships is a big part of this. I just saw from our American Bar Association Friday, they issue a newsletter. The report was that most of the larger law firms are cutting back staff by 15%. And so, I'm sorry, wages by 15% on everybody above a certain level. And it affects most people in the firms, not necessarily the administrative staff, but certainly the professional staff. And so we as advisors in this era, I think need to maybe start the conversation with our clients about how to manage these things, because disputes become bigger if we don't get ahead of them, if we don't initiate something. For example, in the example I gave you about this rent issue, perhaps that email should have come first, is that we're going to stop rent payments effective in April, and we're going to schedule some calls about it, but I wanted to give you some advance warning on it. We're gonna have a conversation with you at some point in time, not just do it and then not answer emails. So implementation of protocols, whether it's for advising clients, and that's going to involve supply chain issues and also employee-employer issues. We have huge unemployment rates. I think globally, we're talking about a 22% unemployment rate now.
Right.
As practitioners, we have to figure out how we're going to manage that. Sometimes that involves us being up to speed on what governmental incentives are available to tell our clients what to do. I have a pretty broad network, and I think I get 10 or 12 emails a day from different law firms, global law firms, that are issuing COVID-19 updates. These are the things that are available to you: small business loans, employee loans. We have a thing here called PPP for paying payrolls, and the guidance with regard to each one of those. And so let's be thinking a bit about how we can manage our practices by including that kind of knowledge in our knowledge base so that we can communicate that to our clients. There's lots of business opportunities here for practitioners because everything is quite dynamic, and the people who are affected by this are your clients, and they may not know. And so to start communicating with them by some email blast or something like that, I think is an effective way to get them to communicate with you digitally. And then we'll talk about how you manage those conversations, but you have to have a knowledge base first in the various disciplines that apply to this pandemic. Some are healthcare issues. When we do get back to work, what advice do I need on how to create a safe workplace for people? If you work in a business, your employees are going to want to know that just because the government says you can go back to work doesn't mean I'm working in a safe workplace. So I think we should all be up to speed on that now. We're just having a conversation earlier, even about access to your place of work. Here and in many places, the work environment in business offices, you take an elevator up. How is it safe to be on an elevator? Do you have to have a mask? Do you have to wear gloves? What are all the policies and procedures that real estate owners have to put in place to welcome people back into the workplace? So we can get ahead of that as practitioners. Let's think about a couple of other things that are the challenges for us. One is contract review or audits. For example, just about every transaction that's affected like this may have, and you people all may have drafted some of these contracts with force majeure clauses or governmental impact on ability to perform. You can begin contract audit reviews of contracts that perhaps you've worked on, or maybe even email your clients and say, we should anticipate that there's going to be a claim for inability to perform. We call that force majeure. Some people call it other terms, but those contract audit reviews, now is a good time for you to be doing that for your clients, and then get ahead of it. Let them know, start some conversation with that contracting party and begin the conversation, because you don't want to end up in litigation, because the court system was backed up in India before. If we allow all of these difficulties to end up in the court system, you're probably not going to be able to achieve the kind of cost-effective and prompt relief for clients that you could if you began some kind of conversation with them now and open up the dialogue or the conversation. So start auditing some contracts, and for clients, it's good for you because we're all looking for revenue, right? I mean, it's a challenging time for all of us. We need the work. But we think the lockdown is keeping us from getting work, when in fact the work opportunities are there if you hunt them down a bit. And so other challenges for you is to figure out whether you have the capacity to manage these disputes without face-to-face conversation. And that's one of the things we want to talk about today, is what tools are out there that enable you to interact with your clients effectively and safely in order to be working from your premises. It may be your home, you may have a home office, you may be back in your office even though clients are not fully up to speed. So we're going to spend a little bit of time today talking about what are the tools that you could be thinking about using. I use a tool called Zoom. We're going to talk about that, and I know it right now. It has a bit of bad publicity, but I think we want to really be thinking about using tools to prevent litigation, because right now the relentless pursuit of litigation is probably not the best dispute resolution mechanism available to you and your clients right now. We are probably, by show of hands, a lot of us are litigators or were, and we enjoy that process. But right now, I'm going to suggest that we think about doing a couple other things first to maybe stay out of that court system, to see if we can manage disputes in a more effective way. Sometimes that involves you doing it yourself because you have the capacity already. You may be trained in dispute resolution. Sometimes it's engaging some other professional in your community or elsewhere to give you advice. Dispute management consultants can facilitate some conversations with you or for you as we work through these difficult times. So,
Tom, just to interrupt again, because you spoke of Zoom. Zoom is one of those applications which is now, or at least was, also being used by various judicial authorities for the purpose of e-courts, etc. So I do not know if the other members, but even we and most of the other webinars are hosted by Zoom, and there's a lot of hue and cry that's going on with Zoom. So can you throw some light as to what should we be concerned about?
So here's what I've seen. First of all, I don't own stock in Zoom. I'm a big fan of Zoom. I've been using Zoom for a long time. I train people how to use Zoom for one of the international institutes. I'm starting online trainings for their practitioners. So I'm biased towards Zoom. But there is no doubt that it's had a lot of bad publicity. What I can tell you is that if we learn how to use the security protocols, and the rest of my slides, I can show you all this if it interests you, or we can just talk about it. But I'm not talking what we have a phrase here, from the seat of my pants. That means I'm BSing. I study Zoom. I use Zoom. I'm giving trainings in Zoom, so I know a lot about the Zoom protocols and how we set up our account to make sure it's safe. In the past few weeks, or let's say month, that we've been talking about this pandemic, I have yet to see a report that a conversation that I've had, or like the conversations that I have, which are mediations or arbitrations or small group meetings, has been Zoom bombed. The Zoom bombing is the result of the education community using Zoom as a platform to teach online. And so most of those reports, and I belong to some, I'm a member of some, because I do a little bit of teaching, I'm a member of listservs that are faculty members. And so I see a lot of the anecdotal stories about Zoom bombing, and it's always classrooms. And so, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be careful. And so it's really about educating yourself in setting up your account. And I can guarantee you, you can even see now, Raj, you see, because this is your account, right?
Right, right.
In the old days, on the top of this screen that you're all looking at, we could see Raj's meeting number. And so in the latest version, they've made that not public. I've been doing this a long time. About 3 weeks ago, a young, she actually is with the civil service now, was locked down, she was home, and she sent me a message, Tom, you're on TV in India. And so sent me a picture of a screenshot from a Zoom training that I had done, I think in 2016. And somebody, it's on a gentleman's website because we did a video of it, and it's me, actually my youngest son who is a lawyer was on it, and there's somebody from Lebanon, there's somebody from India, there's somebody from Brazil, because it was on his website, they could take a screenshot of it and put it on Indian TV. In support of a story about Zoom bombing. Well, really nobody Zoom bombed anything. They just looked at a website and took a screenshot and showed what a Zoom page looks like. But we have to, as practitioners, we are fact-based, right? Our inquiry is always about fact-based. So I would urge all of you, or you can, Raj can share my email with you, and I can help all of you to set up your accounts, whatever you think.
In fact, I speak for the others.
Yeah.
I think they'll be very intrigued to know if we can have a separate session only on Zoom. How can we, how can we really rely amidst all the, indiscretions that are happening against the Zoom app?
I took all of that out of this chat today because I don't know that interests anybody. But for those of you who are interested, we can, Raj, let's set up another one.
Yeah.
And if you choose to use Zoom, I can walk you through. I have a series of slides that walk you through your account page that tells you which buttons to click, which security things are important to you, assuming we're going to be using it in a law setting, whether that's meeting with clients, meeting in a mediation setting, or mediating an arbitration setting. And if you set that account up properly, I can't guarantee anything, but the likelihood of you having a problem, a security issue, is small. We all should have other concerns about sharing documents and data. We don't do that through Zoom, but you should have secure firewalls and all that on your email sharing devices. And all of that depends upon where you're practicing, right? Some people need to practice in not as secure areas because their law office might have built-in firewalls for their internet access and all that. So we still caution you to be a bit cautious about where you're actually sitting online. And so I can tell you that there's other platforms depending upon what you're going to use. WebEx, there's one called Blue Jeans I don't know much about. A lot of people are using Microsoft Teams. But all of that is for much larger settings, webinars, teaching, not necessarily small group conversations. You and your client or 2 or 3 members of their executive team that you're going to advise. And for that, we can set you up with some pretty good protocols. Why do I like Zoom? I like it for the same reason everybody else who's used it likes it. It's very easy to use. One of the things that you should be thinking about, and that's what I wanted to share with you as well, is if you learn how to use Zoom, that's great. But we have to make sure the people that we're advising know how to use it too. And so what I think you should be thinking about to get back into advising clients, and you're going to use something like Zoom, have a little session with them and teach them a few things about it so that they're comfortable. You'll find it's quite easy to do. And it's quite easy for you to show them the 2 or 3 things that you need or they need to have conversations. Sharing documents, annotating documents, showing some things and that. So there's Zoom can be quite effective with lots of different tools, but you decide which tools you're going to use, and then set aside a session with the team at the business you're advising, saying, give me an hour with the team on Monday or whatever, and I'll show them how it works and get them comfortable with it. Then you'll find it to be very effective, because they need to make sure that if they're doing it as well, that you advise them a bit about the security features, so that if they're hosting the meeting, that they're using the same security features that I would be telling you about in another session.
Tom,
Raj.
yeah, Tom, but just a quick question. In international scenario, so when you're traveling and you're doing negotiation in other cross-cultural disputes and you're negotiating with foreign parties, what are the kinds of technology or the companies that are used for conferencing, or for that matter, any other thing that is being used?
Almost universally for the mediation field, we use Zoom. And we use it because it has a feature called breakout rooms. And so if anybody has participated in a mediation, at times we have sessions with one side and then the other side. And so Zoom has the capacity for me to put Deepak and Raj in a room, and Vidya and Naveen in another room. And I can go to Raj's room and say, what are you guys thinking about? Blah, blah, blah. I'll be back in 10 minutes. I can go to the other room and I can separate you. And I can put each of you in your own room. That's a very valuable tool because mediation works that way. It's usually done, at least in part, with private sessions.
So are you saying that there's absolutely no difference in the kind of application that we're using right now? The Zoom application which is being downloaded in India and the applications that is being used in the international scenario?
Exactly. So I think you're the account I'm looking at from my side. If I was hosting this, I would see a different banner at the bottom. Everybody can see that bottom banner.
Right.
On the bottom of your screen, it says mute, stop video participants. Right. Yeah. And so on mine, I have a couple other features that I've set up my account in. And one is called breakout rooms, which is what I just described to you. The latest version of Zoom has a security shield after stop video, and that allows me to stop the call immediately, to turn your camera off, your microphone off. Some of those Zoom bombing things that happen in classrooms now allows the professor to hit one button and boom, it's done. I also have a polling feature on mine, so I was set up I could have asked all of you at the beginning of this, if it was on my account, how many of you have a Zoom account? And we can see that data come up quite quickly. And there's a few other features that are available in the Zoom professional account, which is the paid account, not the free account. The paid account in the US, for me, I've had it for a long time. I think this is still the current rate. It's about $15 US per month for unlimited use. All of the features I'm talking to you about are part of that $15 a month. If you pay for the year, you can do it month by month. I use it a lot, and so I pay for the year, and I think I get 2 months free. So I pay $125 or $130 basically for unlimited use for the year. I can be on it 24 hours a day. So that's one of the other attractive parts of Zoom, is you can do it by the month. And so you don't have to commit a lot of money, a lot of education, a lot of anything to Zoom. What's it going to do for you as a practitioner, right? That's probably a good question, is what do you think you might be able to use it for as an advocate or a business owner, it's to do something quite like this. Let's have a conversation about how are we going to get back, how are we going to open our doors? Or you might, as a lawyer, organize a conversation like this with 8, 10, 12 people at one of your clients, and have everybody share their concerns about a particular contract, or how are we gonna get this supply chain item going again. It's quite easy to set up. One of the other advantages to Zoom is that, have you all used Skype?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if this call was on Skype, right, I would know all of your Skype IDs. True?
True.
Okay. Do I know any of your ID information? None. Because what happened here is Raj sent us a code number, a password, and we logged in. I don't have any of your personal information. Vidya, your name really may be Tom, but you decided to call yourself Vidya on this call. And so we don't get real personal information about anybody. And for some of us in our work, that's important. We learned that in mediation, especially with regard to domestic cases, and especially where there might have been some physical abuse between spouses, and somebody left a home and was off in a shelter or something like that. He or she may not want their partner to know their personal ID. And so we find there's a lot of reasons that Zoom helps us protect people from other people. And that could actually apply in a business setting as well, is where we don't necessarily want to share our Skype ID with everybody in a webinar or a call or something like that. So Zoom has a couple other attributes to it that might be important to you in deciding to choose it as a tool.
In fact,
I'm not saying this should be your only tool. I just, I had a call a couple hours ago, actually, with Raj, you know him, with Tanmay Pandey in Bhopal,
okay.
and with a gentleman in Brazil. And we've all been using Zoom for some time, Tanmay more recently, but we can figure out how to do things quite easily. And that was just a simple call, an introductory call to have people meet. Could we have done it on a phone call? Yeah. Seeing the faces is quite important. The gentleman who taught me Zoom is a guy named Giuseppe Leone. He's originally an Italian gentleman, but lives in the state of Hawaii. And when I first started working with him several years ago, I've never had a phone call with Giuseppe. He only does phone calls on Zoom because he realizes that the face-to-face capacity is helpful.
Much better than just a phone call.
Some people don't like it. I was training a guy in London in Zoom years ago, and in mediation, how to do a mediation online. And he said, can I turn my camera off? And I said, well, you can, but that's not the point. I mean, if you want to be a mediator, the people want to see your face, right?
Right.
And so one of the difficulties is us learning to look at ourselves on a screen and not be uncomfortable with it. And so there's a lot of things we can talk about on Zoom, but I can share with you a couple other thoughts. But let's take a few questions.
I think we are just the. Can we come back with the same login ID? All the viewers with the same login ID. Can we just log in once again? I think it's gonna get cut right now.
Oh, I see.
Can we just come in with the same login ID?
I'm here, yeah.
I'm just trying to, because the problem is that
yeah, no problem.